You step into this house again, and I won't stop at pushing you. That's what my own son said to me. Not a stranger. Not a man off the street. My son. Thatcher stood there in the foyer, tall, dressed in a suit I probably paid for in ways he doesn't even remember, looking down at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. This house belongs to my spouse now, he added, his voice calm, too calm. You need to understand that. I was still on the floor when he said it. Cold marble pressed against my hip. My elbow stung where it hit the ground. I could feel the ache spreading, but it wasn't the pain that held me there. It was the words. This house belongs to my spouse. I remember staring up at him, searching his face for something, anything. That looked like the boy I raised. I didn't find him. What I found was a man I didn't recognize. Have you ever looked at someone you love and realized they've completely changed? Not slowly, not over time. All at once. One moment they're family. The next, they're a stranger standing in your home, telling you that you don't belong there anymore. Tell me the truth. What would you do? Would you argue? Would you fight back? Or would you freeze the way I did, trying to understand how everything slipped so far out of your hands? Because I'll tell you something most people don't admit. Moments like that don't come with warnings. They hit you when you feel safest. I tried to stand up, but my legs didn't cooperate right away. Age does that to you sometimes, but this wasn't just age. It was shock. Thatcher, I said, my voice weaker than I wanted it to be. You don't mean that. He didn't help me up. He didn't even move. Instead, he adjusted his sleeve like he had somewhere better to be. I mean every word, he said, and if you come near this place again without permission. He paused, just long enough for it to settle in. I'll hit you so hard you won't get back up. Silence filled the room after that. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that makes your chest feel tight. The kind that tells you something has broken, and it's not going back to the way it was. If danger like this feels distant, you're not paying attention. Subscribe now, or explain in the comments why you won't. I wish I could tell you I stood up right there and put him in his place. I wish I could tell you I reminded him who built that house, who fed him, who stayed awake through every fever, every nightmare, every bad decision he ever made. But I didn't. I just stared at him. Because in that moment, something settled deep in my chest. A quiet, heavy truth. My son was gone. Not physically, he was standing right in front of me. But the boy who used to run through those halls, laughing, calling me Mom like it meant something. He was gone. And in his place stood a man who was ready to throw me out of my own home. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. If someone tried to take everything you built, everything you sacrificed for, everything that holds your memories, would you walk away quietly? Or would you make sure they regret ever trying? Because I didn't fight him that day. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. And that's exactly why he thought he had already won. What Thatcher didn't understand, what his wife didn't understand either, was that this house, this palace they were so proud to claim, it wasn't just built with money. It was built with history, with agreements, with decisions made long before either of them ever stepped foot inside it. And more importantly, I wasn't the only one tied to it. There was someone else. Someone Thatcher hadn't seen in years. Someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect, especially not inside his own family. If this happened in your home, would you be ready? Subscribe before the next twist hits you unprepared. If you wouldn't tolerate this, comment enough. 3 days later, a car pulled into that driveway. Black, quiet, intentional. And the man who stepped out of it. He took one look at me, then one look at my son. And everything changed. Thatcher thought he owned that house. He thought he had control. He thought I was alone. He had no idea who he was dealing with. My name is Beatrice Harlan. Most people around town call me Nana Beatrice now, and I suppose I've earned that name over the years. Time has a way of softening how people see you, turning your struggles into stories, your strength into something quiet. But there was nothing quiet about the life I lived to build that house. You see, when people drive past those white pillars and wide windows, they see comfort. They see wealth. They see something that looks like it's always been there. What they don't see is the cost. They don't see the years it took. They don't see the woman I used to be. I wasn't born into anything special. And neither was my husband, Harlan. We met when we had more hope than money and more determination than sense. He had rough hands from working long hours, and I had dreams that didn't quite fit the life we were living at the time. But we made a promise early on. If we were going to build something, it would be ours. Not borrowed. Not handed down. Not dependent on anyone else. Ours. We started small, smaller than most people would be comfortable admitting. A trailer. Not the kind people fix up for comfort. The kind you tolerate because you have no other choice. The roof rattled when the wind picked up. The floors creaked like they were tired of holding us up. And in the winter, well, winter was its own kind of test. There was one winter I still remember clearer than most. The temperature dropped so low that the pipes froze twice in 1 week. We had blankets piled on top of us at night, wearing layers just to keep from waking up shaking. We didn't have proper heat. We had a small unit that worked when it felt like it, and most nights, it didn't. Harlan used to wake up before sunrise, rubbing his hands together, breathing into them just to get some feeling back before heading out to work. And I'd stay behind, trying to stretch what little we had into something that felt like enough. There were nights we sat in silence, not because we had nothing to say, but because we were both thinking the same thing. This has to mean something. And it did. Every cold night. Every skipped comfort. Every moment we chose building over ease. It all went somewhere. When we finally got the land, it didn't look like much. Just open space and possibility. Red dirt that clung to your shoes. No structure, no beauty, no sign of what it would become. But Harlan stood there one evening, hands on his hips, and said, "This is it, B. This is where we build everything." And we did. Piece by piece. We didn't hire big crews at the start. We couldn't afford to. Harlan worked during the day, and in the evenings, he worked on that land. I helped where I could. We measured, we planned, we adjusted when things didn't go right, which happened more often than not. There were mistakes, plenty of them. But we didn't quit. Not once. And slowly, something started to take shape. Walls turned into rooms. Rooms turned into a home. And that home grew into something people couldn't ignore. Folks around town started calling it the Gables. Later, they gave it another name. The Palace. I never cared much for that title. Because to me, it wasn't a palace. It was our life. Every corner of that house carried something real. The staircase. Harlan rebuilt it twice because he didn't like how it felt under his feet. The kitchen, that was my domain. Every meal, every celebration, every quiet morning, it all happened there. The library, that was his favorite. Shelves lined with books he collected over the years. A chair that fit him just right. That room smelled like cedar and thyme. Nothing in that house was random. Nothing was just decoration. It all meant something. And that's why what came later hurt the way it did. Because you can't separate a place like that from the people who built it. By the time the house stood tall and strong, we had our son, Thatcher. And for a long time, he was everything we hoped for. Bright, curious, full of energy. He used to run through those halls like the place was built just for him, and in a way, it was. Harlan would take him outside, teaching him how to fix things, how to use his hands, how to respect what he had. I taught him everything else. How to speak kindly. How to listen. how to value people over things. Or at least, I thought I did. There was a time when he'd sit at the kitchen table, swinging his legs, asking questions about everything. "Did you really build this, Mom?" he'd say, wide-eyed. And I'd smile and tell him, "We did, sweetheart, every bit of it." Back then, I believed he understood what that meant. Change doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. You don't notice it at first because it doesn't demand your attention. Thatcher grew up, as children do. He went out into the world, built a life of his own, made decisions I didn't always agree with, but I trusted him. Because that's what you do as a parent. You trust that what you taught them will stay with them, even when you're not there to remind them. And for a while, I believed it had. Then I lost my husband. 5 years ago. And I won't dress that up in softer words. It changed everything. A house that once felt full became quiet in a way that's hard to explain. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. I still moved through the same rooms, still touched the same walls, still sat in the same places we shared. But something was missing. Harlan wasn't just part of that house. He was part of me. And without him, everything felt heavier. Even the silence. That kind of loneliness does something to a person. It makes you more willing to open your door. More willing to give. More willing to overlook things you might have questioned before. So when Thatcher came back, looking worn down, talking about problems with his work, saying he needed a place to regroup, I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't set conditions. I just welcomed him home. Because that's what a mother does. I thought I was bringing my family back together. I thought the house would feel alive again. I thought I was doing the right thing. What I didn't realize was that I had just opened the door to everything that followed. And the truth, I didn't know I was building a palace for someone else to try and take. When Thatcher came back, he didn't arrive the way I expected. No confidence. No pride. No sense of direction. Just quiet. He stood at the front door with his shoulders slightly slumped, like the world had pressed down on him harder than he could handle. His clothes were still expensive, but there was something off about the way he wore them, like they no longer belonged to him. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than I had heard in years. "Things didn't work out the way I planned." That was all it took. I didn't ask him to explain right away. I didn't question where things went wrong or why he hadn't called sooner. I just stepped aside and let him in. Because when your child shows up like that, you don't interrogate. You open the door. He didn't stay alone for long. 2 days later, he came to me in the kitchen, hands in his pockets, packing slightly like he used to when he was nervous as a boy. "There's something else," he said. I already knew. "There's someone with you," I replied. He nodded. "My wife," he said, "Sloane." That was the first time I heard her name. "She's been helping me through everything. We just need a place to land for a while, get back on our feet." A place to land. Those words sounded temporary. Safe. Reasonable. "Of course," I said, "this is your home." And just like that, I made space for both of them. Sloane arrived that same evening. She stepped out of the car like she was arriving somewhere she already owned. Tall, well-dressed, every detail about her appearance was intentional. Not a strand of hair out of place, not a wrinkle in her clothing. Even the way she looked at the house felt measured. Not admiring. Assessing. When she reached the front steps, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Harlan," she said, extending her hand instead of offering a hug. "I've heard so much about you." Her voice was smooth, controlled. I shook her hand anyway. "Call me Beatrice," I said. She gave a small nod, like she had just approved something. "Of course, Beatrice." There was something in the way she said my name. Not disrespectful, but not warm either. Neutral in a way that felt deliberate. At first, nothing seemed wrong. That's how it usually starts. Small changes, easy to overlook, easy to excuse. The first thing she did was move a vase. It sat on a table in the hallway, a gift Harlan gave me years ago. Nothing flashy, just something that meant something to me. I noticed it was gone the next morning. I found it later on a different table, replaced with something newer, something that looked like it belonged in a catalog instead of a home. "Oh," Sloane said when I mentioned it, "I thought this arrangement flowed better." Flowed better. I smiled and let it go. Because it was just a vase. But it didn't stop there. The curtains in the living room were next. "Heavy fabrics like these make the space feel closed in," she said, standing by the window, pulling them back as if they offended her. "Lighter tones would open everything up." A week later, they were replaced. No discussion. No permission. Just gone. Then came the kitchen. My kitchen. She didn't remove anything at first, just rearranged. Utensils moved, cabinets reorganized, spices placed in different containers. Efficiency, she called it. "It's easier this way." Maybe it was. But it wasn't mine anymore. What made it harder to confront wasn't what she did. It was how she did it. Always polite. Always composed. Never raising her voice. Never crossing a line openly. She didn't insult me directly. She just corrected everything around me. "This layout feels outdated. This could be modernized. This doesn't match the tone of the home." Little comments. Small enough to dismiss. But consistent enough to mean something. And Thatcher. He agreed with her. Every time. At first, I thought he was just trying to keep the peace. New marriage, new stress, new pressures. That's what I told myself. But then I noticed the way he started speaking. Shorter responses. Less warmth. Less patience. He stopped sitting with me in the evenings. Stopped asking how I was doing. Stopped calling me Mom when Sloane was around. It became Beatrice. Like I was just another person in the house. Not the one who built it. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And slowly, the house began to feel different. Not physically at first. Emotionally. Rooms I used to move through freely started to feel unfamiliar. Conversations shifted. Decisions were made without me. Guests began to visit, people I didn't know, invited by Sloane. They walked through my home like it was hers, admiring the structure, complimenting the layout, asking her questions. And she answered, like she owned every answer. I stayed polite. I stayed quiet. Because I didn't want conflict. Because I believed it would pass. Because I thought, if I just gave it time, things would settle. But there's something people don't tell you about situations like that. They don't correct themselves. They grow. At first it was small. But small things grow. And by the time you recognize what's happening, it's already taken more than you intended to give. Have you ever welcomed someone who slowly took everything? Be honest, would you have stopped her early? I asked myself those same questions. More than once. Why didn't I say something sooner? Why did I set boundaries? Why did I allow it to continue? The answer is simple. I didn't want to lose my son again. Not after losing my husband. Not after the house had already grown so quiet. So I convinced myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. I told myself I was being patient, understanding, supportive. But patience, in the wrong situation, can look a lot like surrender. By the time I realized what was happening, Sloane wasn't adjusting to the house anymore. She was reshaping it. And Thatcher, he wasn't caught in the middle. He had already chosen a side. I just hadn't accepted it yet. It didn't happen all at once. That's what made it harder to fight. There was no single moment where they sat me down and said, "Leave." Instead, it came wrapped in careful language. Soft tones, reasonable words. "Beatrice," Thatcher said one afternoon, leaning against the kitchen counter like he belonged there more than I did. "We've been thinking." That word, "we," started showing up more often. Not I. Not you and I. Just we. "Sloane and I feel like you might be more comfortable in the guest space over the garage," he continued. "It's quieter, more private." More private. I looked at him, trying to understand how my own home had suddenly become somewhere I needed to be relocated within. "I'm comfortable here," I said. Sloane stepped in before he could respond. "It's not about comfort," she said gently. "It's about practicality. We host now, a lot, and having you in the main suite makes things complicated." Complicated. That's what I had become. I didn't agree. Not really. But I didn't fight either. Because the way they framed it, it didn't feel like a battle. It felt like something already decided. Within 2 days, my things were packed. Not by me. By someone Sloane hired. A woman I had never met, folding my clothes like they didn't carry years of memory, placing them into boxes without asking what mattered and what didn't. I stood there watching it happen, my hands resting at my sides, unsure where to place myself in the middle of it. "This will be better for everyone," Thatcher said as he walked past me, barely slowing down. Better for everyone. I didn't realize everyone no longer included me. The space over the garage wasn't terrible. That's the part that made it easier for them. It was clean, functional, quiet. But it wasn't my home. It didn't carry history. It didn't hold the life I built. It was a place you stay in when you're passing through. Not a place you're pushed into permanently. From the window, I could see the main house clearly. The house. My house. Standing exactly where it always had, except now I wasn't part of it. That window became my view of everything I had lost. I'd sit there in the mornings, holding a cup of tea, watching the front door open and close. Delivery trucks came and went. Furniture I didn't recognize was brought in. Pieces I did recognize were taken out. One afternoon, I watched 2 men carry out a chair. Not just any chair. Harlan's chair. The one that sat in the library. The one he spent hours in, reading, thinking, resting after long days. I pressed my hand against the glass as they set it down near the curb. Like it was nothing. Like it hadn't held a lifetime of quiet moments. I didn't go down to stop them. I just watched. Because by then, I understood something. My presence wasn't wanted. It wasn't just the space I lost. It was my place in the house. When I walked into the main building, which became less frequent over time, I felt it immediately. Conversations stopped. Not out of respect. Out of discomfort. Guests would glance at me, unsure who I was. Staff members Sloane hired treated me like I was in the way. And Thatcher. He barely acknowledged me. "Beatrice," he'd say in passing, like he was greeting someone he barely knew. "Try to keep to your area when we have people over." Your area. As if the rest of the house belonged to someone else. Sloane didn't just live in the house. She presented it. Every week, there was something. Dinners, gatherings, events filled with people who spoke loudly about success and influence, using words that sounded impressive but felt empty. They filled the rooms I used to know. Laughed in spaces that once held quiet meaning. Walked across floors Harlan built with his own hands. And Sloane stood at the center of it all. Hosting. Directing. Owning the attention of everyone who stepped through that door. "This house has such presence," I overheard one woman say during a gathering. Sloane smiled. "Yes," she replied. "We've worked very hard to maintain it." Way. I stood near the hallway, unnoticed, listening to someone else take credit for a life I lived. At night, the house used to be calm. After Harlan passed, It became quiet in a different way, still but heavy. Now, it was loud again, but not in a way that brought comfort. Laughter echoed through the halls. Music played from rooms I no longer entered. Voices carried through open windows while I sat alone across the yard. I could hear everything, but I wasn't part of any of it. There's something about hearing joy from a place you've been removed from. It doesn't feel warm. It feels distant, like you're listening to a life that used to belong to you. The more time passed, the clearer it became. Thatcher wasn't caught between two worlds. He had stepped fully into one, and it wasn't mine. He walked differently now, spoke with more certainty, carried himself like the house had always been his to control. One evening, I tried to sit with him. Just for a moment. He was in the living room, reviewing something on his phone. "Thatcher," I said softly, taking a seat nearby, "do you have a minute?" He didn't look up right away. When he did, it wasn't with warmth. It was with impatience. "I'm busy," he said. "Can this wait?" I nodded, even though I knew it wouldn't. Because moments like that don't come back. It took me longer than it should have. Longer than I'm proud to admit. But eventually, I stopped making excuses for it. Stopped telling myself it was temporary. Stopped pretending I still had a place in that house. Because the truth was simple. They didn't push me out all at once. They made me feel like I no longer belonged. And once that feeling settles in, you start stepping back on your own. That's when I realized I wasn't family anymore. Not in that house. Not in their world. I was something else. Something they tolerated. Something they adjusted around. Something they planned to remove completely. I just didn't know how far they were willing to go yet. Looking back now, that was the turning point. Not the shouting. Not the threat. Not even what happened later. It was that quiet understanding. That I had been replaced in my own life. And once you reach that point, everything that comes next feels a little less surprising. There are dates you don't forget. No matter how much time passes. No matter how much life changes around you. For me, it was the day Harlan left this world. The anniversary came quietly that year. No reminders from anyone else. No acknowledgement from the house that once held his presence in every corner. Just me, waking up in that small room over the garage, staring at the ceiling, already knowing what the day meant. I didn't need a calendar. My heart remembered. I moved slowly that morning, took my time getting dressed, chose something simple, something he would have liked. There was only one place I wanted to go. The library. His chair was still there. At least, I believed it was. The air felt different as I stepped out of the guest house. Cool, still, quiet in a way that made everything feel heavier. Each step toward the main house carried something with it. Years of memory, moments I hadn't touched in a long time. I wasn't going there to argue. I wasn't going there to reclaim anything. I just wanted to sit. Just for a little while. To remember him in the only place that still felt close to who we used to be. I reached the back entrance, opened the door slowly, and stepped inside. The house was quiet. For once. No music. No voices. No movement. It felt like the only moment I had left where the house belonged to me again. I made my way down the hallway without hesitation. Past the kitchen. Past the living room. Straight to the library. My hand reached for the handle. And stopped. Something felt off. I tried it anyway. It didn't move. I frowned slightly and tried again, this time pressing down harder. Still nothing. Locked. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door like it might change its mind if I gave it enough time. Then I knocked. Soft at first. Then again, louder. No answer. I stepped back slowly, confusion settling into something sharper. That door had never been locked before. Not once. I turned, my steps quicker now, moving back toward the front of the house. "Thatcher," I called out. My voice echoed more than I expected. After a moment, I heard movement. Footsteps. Measured, calm. He appeared at the end of the hallway, adjusting his cuff like he had somewhere to be. He didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, he looked inconvenienced. "Beatrice," he said, "you're early." Early. Like I needed permission to exist in my own home. "I can't get into the library," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The door is locked." He glanced in that direction briefly, then back at me. "Yes," he said, "it's been secured." Secured. The word didn't sit right. "Why?" I asked. Before he could answer, I heard the sound of heels against the floor. Sloane. She stepped into view with that same composed expression she always carried, holding a glass in her hand like the moment didn't require anything more from her. "The library is being used differently now," she said. "It's no longer a shared space." I turned toward her slowly. "Shared," I repeated. "It's my home." She tilted her head slightly, like she was correcting a misunderstanding. "That's not how we're managing things anymore," she replied. Managing. There it was again. Language that removed me without saying it directly. "I just want to sit in there for a while," I said. "Today is." "I'm aware of what today is," she interrupted. Her tone didn't change. Still calm. Still controlled. But there was no room in it for what I was asking. Sloane took a step closer. "Beatrice," she said, "we've had to make decisions for the sake of the house, for its future." I felt something tighten in my chest. "This house doesn't need managing like that," I replied. "It's been standing just fine." She gave a small smile. "Standing isn't the same as progressing." Then she said it. Clear, direct, final. "The property belongs to us now, to me and Thatcher." For a second, I didn't react. Not because I agreed, but because I needed to make sure I heard it correctly. "To you," I said quietly. I turned to Thatcher. Because no matter what she said, that was still my son. "Tell her," I said. "Tell her that's not true." I gave him a chance. A moment to step in. To correct it. To remember who he was. He looked at me, and then away. Then back again. And what I saw in his face wasn't hesitation. It was agreement. "She's right," he said. Just like that. No softness. No apology. No explanation. Just agreement. "You've held on to this place long enough," he continued. "But things change." I shook my head slowly. "Thatcher, this is your father's home. We built this together." "And now it needs to evolve," he replied. "You can't keep everything the same forever." I took a step toward him. "This isn't about keeping things the same," I said. "This is about respect." That's when his expression shifted. Something colder. Something final. "You're a relic, Mom," he said. The word didn't come out loud, but it landed harder than anything he had said before. A relic. Something outdated. Something left behind. Something no longer useful. I felt my hand move before I thought about it. Not to hurt him. Not to attack him. Just to reach him. To grab his arm the way I used to when he was younger, when he needed to be brought back to himself. "Thatcher, listen to me." I didn't finish the sentence. Because in the next moment, he shoved me. Not a warning. Not a light push. A full, deliberate force that sent me backward. My feet lost balance instantly. My body hit the floor before I could catch myself. The impact shot through my side, my elbow striking hard against the surface beneath me. For a second, everything went quiet. Not around me. Inside me. Like something had snapped into place. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lay there, staring up at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. My son, the boy I carried, raised, protected, had just put his hands on me like I meant nothing. I heard Sloane exhale softly. Not shocked, not concerned, just observing. And Thatcher, he didn't rush to help me up. He didn't step back in regret. He stood over me, looking down, like I was the problem. And that's when my son said something I will never forget. I was still on the floor when he spoke. My body hadn't caught up to what had just happened. My elbow throbbed where it struck the ground, and there was a dull ache spreading through my side, but none of that compared to what I felt hearing his voice above me. Cold, steady, unmoved. Don't you ever put your hands on me again. There was no hesitation in it. No uncertainty. Just a firm line drawn where there had never been one before. I turned my head slowly, looking up at him from the floor. At my son. And for the first time, I didn't recognize him at all. He stepped closer. Not to help. Not to check if I was hurt. But to make sure I heard him clearly. If you step into this house again without permission, he said, his voice lowering just enough to carry weight, I won't stop at pushing you next time. The room felt smaller. Tighter. Like the walls themselves were closing in around that moment. You hear me, he added. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because my mind was still trying to catch up to the reality in front of me. This house belongs to my spouse now, he continued. You don't get to walk in here like you still have control. Belongs. That word again. Repeated like it could make something untrue become real. I pushed myself up slowly, my hand pressing against the floor for support. It took more effort than it should have. Not because I couldn't stand, but because something inside me had shifted. I looked at him, searching one last time for anything familiar. Anything that connected him to the boy I raised. Thatcher, I said quietly. He didn't let me finish. If you go near this place again, he said, cutting through my voice completely, I will hit you so hard you won't get back up. Silence followed. Heavy, still, final. No one corrected him. No one softened it. Sloane stood a few steps away, watching, her expression unchanged, like she had already accepted this version of him. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't raise my voice. Because something inside me had already made a decision. Not out loud. Not dramatic. Just clear. The son I raised would never speak to me that way. The son I raised would never stand over me like that. The son I raised would never turn his home into a place I feared entering. Which meant one thing. The man standing in front of me was not the son I knew. People think pain always shows itself. That it has to come with tears, or shaking hands, or loud reactions. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it settles quietly. Deep. Heavy. Like something pressing down on your chest, making it harder to breathe without you even realizing it at first. That's what it felt like. I stood there, facing him, but already feeling distant from everything around me. The house. The hallway. The voices. Even him. It was like I had been removed from it all, while still standing in the middle of it. There's a moment in life that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with warning. It doesn't ask for your permission. It just arrives. And once it does, you can't go back to what you believed before. That moment came for me right there. Looking at Thatcher. Hearing his words. Feeling the space between who he was and who he had become. My son was gone. Not lost. Not confused. Gone. And in his place stood someone who saw me as an obstacle. Someone who believed I could be pushed aside. Someone who thought fear would keep me away. I didn't stay. There was nothing left to say in that moment. No argument that would change him. No memory strong enough to bring him back. So I turned, slowly, carefully, and walked out. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of the fall, but because of what I was leaving behind. Not just a house, a life, a version of my family that no longer existed. I stepped outside, the air hitting my face in a way that felt sharper than before. And I kept walking, across the yard, back toward the small space they had moved me into. The place, they decided, was enough for me. I sat in the dark for a long time after that. Didn't turn on the lights. Didn't move much. Just sat there, letting everything settle. The pain in my arm. The weight in my chest. The words still echoing in my mind. I will hit you so hard you won't get back up. It repeated itself. Not loudly. Just enough to stay present. Just enough to remind me of what had changed. She never saw it coming, and most people don't. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. If you're still watching, comment justice. They thought that was the end of it. That I would stay quiet. Stay out of the way. Accept what they decided. And live the rest of my days in that small space, watching from a distance. They believed fear would be enough. That the threat would keep me where they wanted me. But what they didn't understand was that something else had already taken its place. Not anger. Not yet. Something steadier than that. Something clearer. The kind of clarity that only comes when you've lost everything you thought you still had. I sat there in the dark, listening to the silence settle around me. And for the first time since all of this began, I stopped hoping it would fix itself. I stopped waiting for things to return to how they were. Because they wouldn't. And deep down, I already knew what needed to happen next. I didn't go back to the house that night. Not even to collect anything. There was nothing inside those walls that I needed in that moment. Not after what had just happened. I stayed in the small space over the garage, sitting in the same chair for hours, letting the quiet settle around me. No lights. No distractions. Just time and the weight of everything I had heard. Most people think silence means weakness. That if you're not speaking, not reacting, not fighting back, you've already lost. But silence can be something else. It can be where decisions are made. I went over everything in my mind. Not just the threat. Not just the shove. Everything. The small changes. The conversations. The way my name had been replaced. The way my home had been adjusted piece by piece until I no longer fit inside it. And for the first time, I stopped trying to explain it away. Stopped making excuses for them. Stopped telling myself it wasn't intentional. Because it was. Every step. Every decision. Every word. They didn't just take space from me. They removed me from it. There's a difference between being hurt and being finished. Hurt keeps you stuck. It keeps you looking backward, trying to understand something that no longer makes sense. But when you reach a certain point, that changes. You stop asking why. You start asking what now. That's where I was sitting. Not broken. Not confused. Just clear. And clarity has a way of cutting through everything else. They thought I was alone. That was their first mistake. They thought I had no options. That was their second. And most importantly, they forgot something about this house. Something about how it came to be. Because while Harlan and I built it together, we didn't start everything on our own. There was someone else. Someone who had been part of the beginning. Someone who didn't tolerate disrespect, especially not inside his own family. My brother. Vance. Vance wasn't the kind of man people forgot. Not because he demanded attention, but because of how he carried himself. Quiet, direct, certain. He didn't speak more than necessary, but when he did, people listened. We hadn't spoken in a while. Not because anything was wrong. Life just has a way of creating distance over time. But that didn't change who he was, or what he stood for. And it didn't change one important fact. He knew exactly what that house meant. Because he was there when it all started. I sat there for a long time before I moved. Not because I was unsure, but because I understood what that call would mean. Once I made it, there would be no going back to quiet tolerance. No more pretending things would fix themselves. No more waiting for someone else to do the right thing. This would be different. Final. I reached for the phone. An old one. Still sitting where it had always been. One of the few things they hadn't bothered to replace. My hand didn't shake. Not anymore. I dialed the number slowly, each press deliberate. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice on the other end. Yeah. Same tone I remembered. Steady. Grounded. Vance, I said. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough for recognition to settle in. B, he replied. I closed my eyes for a moment. It's me. Another pause. Shorter this time. What's going on? He asked. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask why I was calling. Just went straight to what mattered. Because he already knew. I took a breath. They've taken the house, I said. Silence. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Just silence. The kind that means he's processing, not questioning. I didn't explain everything. I didn't need to. Vance understood more from what I didn't say than what I did. They've gone too far, I added quietly. Another pause. Then his voice again. Lower this time. How far? I looked down at my arm, the bruise already beginning to show. Far enough, I said. That was all it took. I need you to come home, I said. No hesitation. No extra words. Just the truth. There was a brief sound on the other end, like he had shifted his stance. Then. When? Now, I replied. Another short pause. Then I said the one thing that mattered most. Bring the black briefcase. Silence followed that. But this time, it carried something different. Understanding. Complete and immediate. He didn't ask what was inside it. He didn't ask why I needed it. He didn't question the request at all. Because he already knew. All right, he said, I'll be there. No drama. No long conversation. Just a decision made. And once Vance made a decision, it didn't change. I placed the phone back down carefully. The room felt different now. Not lighter. Not easier. But steadier. Like something had shifted into place. For the first time since all of this began, I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hopping for change. I had made one. They had no idea what was coming. No idea what that call meant. No idea what was sitting inside that briefcase. And that was their biggest mistake. Because whatever they thought they had secured, whatever control they believed they had gained, it was built on something they didn't fully understand. And soon enough, they were going to find out. I leaned back in the chair, letting the silence return, but it didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't empty. It wasn't heavy. It was waiting. And this time, I wasn't the one being pushed aside. After the call, everything moved differently. Not around them. Around me. Days didn't rush past the way they used to. They stretched, lengthened, each hour settling in like it had something to prove. Morning came without urgency. Night arrived without comfort. I kept to myself. No visits to the main house. No attempts to speak to Thatcher. No effort to be seen. That part of me had already stepped back. Now I was watching. The window in that small room became my place of observation. From there, I could see everything clearly. The driveway, the front steps, the large windows that used to reflect a life I recognized. Now, they reflected something else. Activity continued as if nothing had changed. Cars pulled in. Guests stepped out. Laughter carried across the yard. They moved through the house with confidence, like everything inside it belonged exactly where they placed it. And in their minds, it did. The changes became more noticeable, not just in what was added, but in what disappeared. Pieces of my life began leaving that house, one by one, not in dramatic moments, in quiet, steady removal. Boxes carried out, furniture loaded into trucks, items I hadn't touched in years, but still knew exactly where they belonged, vanished without a word. No one asked me. No one informed me. They simply decided, and followed through. It happened on the third day, late afternoon, the sun hanging low, casting long light across the yard. I was sitting by the window when I saw them bring it out. The rocking chair. Harlan built that chair himself. Not from a kit. Not from a store. With his own hands. I remembered the way he tested it, sitting back slowly, adjusting the curve until it moved just right. It had been placed on the porch for years. Not because it matched anything, but because it meant something. I watched as two men carried it down the steps. No care. No hesitation. Just another object being removed. They set it near the edge of the driveway, alongside other things waiting to be taken away. One of them gave it a slight push. It rocked once, then stopped. I didn't move. Didn't rush down to stop them. Didn't call out. Didn't even open the door. I stayed exactly where I was. Hands resting in my lap. Eyes fixed on that chair. Because I understood something in that moment. If I stepped in now, it wouldn't change anything. They had already decided what stayed and what didn't. And I was no longer part of that decision. There's a kind of strength that doesn't show itself loudly. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't demand attention. It holds. It waits. That's what I chose. Not because I was weak, but because I knew this wasn't the moment. Not yet. Reacting too soon would only give them what they expected. A response. An outburst. Something they could dismiss. So I gave them nothing. No reaction. No interruption. Just silence. From where I sat, I could see it clearly. They were comfortable. More than comfortable. Certain. Sloane moved through the house, like every decision she made was final. Thatcher followed her lead without question. They hosted more often now. Larger gatherings. More people. More noise. More presence. The house looked full again. But it wasn't the kind of fullness we built. This was something else. Something that didn't carry history. Only display. They believed they had secured everything. The space. The authority. The future of that house. Every step they took showed it. Every decision reinforced it. They didn't check over their shoulders. Didn't question what they had done. Didn't consider that anything might interrupt what they had built. Because in their minds, it was already settled. Waiting can feel like doing nothing. But it is. It's a choice. A deliberate pause before something shifts. Every hour that passed wasn't empty. It was building. Quietly. Steadily. Like something gathering strength behind a closed door. I kept my routine simple. Woke up. Sat by the window. Watched. Listened. Waited. No distractions. No attempts to fill the silence. Just awareness. They never looked toward the guest house. Not once. Not with concern. Not with curiosity. As far as they were concerned, I had accepted my place, that I had stepped aside completely, that I was finished. And that assumption was exactly what I needed. Something had changed in me after that day on the floor. Not anger, not fear. Something steadier, more focused. The kind of clarity that doesn't rush, that doesn't react, that moves when the time is right. I wasn't thinking about what they had taken anymore. I was thinking about what still remained, and how it would be used. They thought I was finished, but I was just getting started. The fourth morning felt different. Not in a way I could explain right away, but in a way I recognized. Like something had finally reached its point. I didn't need to check the time. Didn't need to look for signs. I already knew. He was coming. I heard the car before I saw it. Not loud. Not rushed. Just steady. The kind of sound that doesn't need attention to be noticed. I stood by the window, already knowing who it was. A black sedan turned into the driveway, moving with purpose, not hesitation. It came to a stop without drama. No sudden movements. No wasted motion. The engine cut off. And for a brief moment, everything felt still. The driver's door opened. Vance stepped out. Same as I remembered. Time had added years, yes, but not weakness. He stood tall, shoulders set, movements measured. Not stiff. Not slow. Controlled. He adjusted his jacket once, briefly scanning the property, not like a visitor, but like someone assessing a situation. His eyes moved across the house. The windows. The entrance. The yard. Taking it all in without saying a word. Then he turned toward the smaller building. Toward me. I stepped outside before he reached the door. Didn't call his name. Didn't rush toward him. I just walked forward. And he met me halfway. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. He looked at me the way only someone who has known you your entire life can. Not just seeing you. Reading you. Noticing what others ignore. His eyes moved from my face, down to my arm. He didn't ask about it. Didn't point. Didn't react outwardly. But I saw it. The shift. Subtle. Controlled. His jaw tightened just slightly. His shoulders squared a little more. And that was enough. Because Vance didn't need to raise his voice to show anger. He carried it quietly. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that acts. You called, he said. Simple. Direct. I did, I replied. He gave a small nod. Good. No questions about whether I should have. No hesitation about being there. Just acceptance. Then his gaze moved past me, toward the main house. They inside, he asked. Yes, I said. Another nod. No surprise. No reaction. Just confirmation. Standing next to him, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Not comfort. Something stronger than that. Stability. The kind that doesn't come from words. The kind that comes from knowing someone sees the situation clearly and isn't going to ignore it. Vance didn't rush. Didn't speak more than necessary. He simply stood there, taking in everything. And in that stillness, there was weight. His hand moved slightly, and that's when I noticed it. The black briefcase. Held firmly at his side. Not flashy. Not oversized. Just solid. Intentional. The kind of object that doesn't need explanation, but carries one anyway. He didn't mention it. Didn't draw attention to it. But its presence changed the moment. Because it meant one thing. He came prepared. Most people would have asked for details. What happened? Why now? How far things had gone. Vance didn't. Because he already understood enough. He had seen the house. Seen me. Seen the bruise. That was all he needed. All right, he said quietly. One word. But it carried decision. Something changed in that moment. Not around the house. Inside it. Even from where we stood, I could feel it. The balance that had leaned so heavily in their favor was no longer steady. They didn't know it yet. Didn't sense it. But it had already begun. The shift. Vance stepped slightly ahead of me. Not in a way that pushed me aside. In a way that placed himself between me and whatever came next. No announcement. No statement. Just position. And in that position, there was something clear. I wasn't alone anymore. He started walking. Straight toward the main entrance. No hesitation. No pause. Each step measured. Certain. I followed behind him, not rushing, not falling back. Just steady. The distance between the guest house and the main house felt different this time. Shorter. Lighter. Because I wasn't walking it alone. As we approached the front door, I could hear them inside. Voices. Movement. Laughter. They were comfortable. Relaxed. Completely unaware of what was about to step through that door. Vance stopped just short of the entrance. Not to hesitate. To observe. One brief glance. One quiet breath. Then his hand reached forward. 9.13, the moment before everything changes. He didn't knock. Didn't announce himself. He opened the door. And stepped inside. I followed him in, the air inside the house feeling different the moment we crossed the threshold. Not because anything had physically changed, but because of what had just entered it. Control. Authority. And something else they hadn't prepared for. Accountability. And in just a few moments, they were going to face all of it. The moment we stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. Not loudly. Not in a way that stopped everything at once. But enough. Enough to be noticed. Voices softened. Movement slowed. The house that had been so full of careless confidence just moments ago adjusted. People turned. Some paused mid-conversation. Others simply watched, trying to understand who had just walked in and why the air suddenly felt heavier. Vance didn't acknowledge any of them. Didn't greet. Didn't introduce himself. He walked straight forward, the briefcase steady at his side, his focus fixed ahead. I followed just behind him, my steps calm, my eyes forward. For the first time since all of this began, I wasn't the one entering that house uncertain. It didn't take long. Sloane saw us first. She stood near the center of the room, mid-conversation with a small group, her posture confident as always. But the moment her eyes landed on Vance, something shifted. Not fear. Not yet. But awareness. She stopped speaking. The people around her followed her gaze, their attention moving toward us. And then Thatcher turned. His expression changed the second he saw me. Not surprise. Annoyance. Like I had broken a rule simply by walking in. But when his eyes moved past me, to Vance, that annoyance tightened into something else. Something uncertain. What is this? Thatcher said, stepping forward. His tone wasn't welcoming. It wasn't confused. It was defensive. You don't just walk in here like this, he added, his voice rising slightly as he approached. Vance stopped a few steps inside the room. He didn't close the distance. Didn't meet Thatcher halfway. He simply stood there. Still. Calm. Unmoved. Then he spoke. Good, he said quietly. Just one word. But it landed with weight. Thatcher frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. Vance didn't answer immediately. He let the silence sit. Let the room feel it. Then, It means I don't have to come looking for you. Sloane recovered quickly. She always did. Composure returned to her posture as she stepped beside Thatcher, her voice controlled, measured. I'm sorry, she said, though there was no apology in it. And you are. Vance didn't look at her right away. His attention stayed on Thatcher. I'm family, he replied. That was all. No explanation. No details. Just a statement. Sloane's expression didn't change, but something in her stance tightened. And what exactly is it you think you're doing? She asked. Vance finally turned his head slightly, acknowledging her presence. Fixing something that's gone too far, he said. Thatcher let out a short breath, shaking his head slightly. This is unnecessary, he said. Whatever she told you. Vance cut him off. I haven't asked her for anything yet. That stopped him for a moment. Just long enough. But Thatcher pushed forward anyway. You're making this into something it's not, he continued. This house is under control. We've made arrangements. Everything here is handled. Then he said it again. Louder this time. Clear. This house belongs to my spouse. The room went quiet. Not completely silent, but enough for those words to land. To settle. To be heard by everyone standing there. I didn't react. Didn't interrupt. Didn't correct him. Because this moment wasn't mine to carry anymore. Vance stood exactly where he was, the briefcase still in his hand. He didn't respond immediately. Didn't challenge the statement. Didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Thatcher. Long enough for the confidence in that statement to begin feeling less certain. People were watching now. Not casually. Carefully. The kind of attention that comes when something feels off, but hasn't fully revealed itself yet. Sloane glanced around briefly, aware of the shift, then back at Vance. If you have something to say, she said, you can say it quickly, we have guests. Vance nodded once. I can see that, he replied. His tone didn't change. Still calm. Still controlled. But this won't take long. Thatcher crossed his arms. You're not in a position to make demands here, he said. Vance tilted his head slightly. No, he replied, but I am in a position to correct you. A small pause. Then he added, you said this house belongs to your spouse. Thatcher didn't hesitate. That's right, he said. Firm. Confident. Certain. That's when Vance moved. Not suddenly. Not aggressively. Just one step forward. Then another. Closing the distance slightly. The briefcase remained steady in his hand. Every eye in the room followed that movement. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was deliberate. He stopped again, positioned himself directly across from Thatcher and Sloane. Then slowly, he lowered the briefcase, placed it carefully on the table between them. No rush, no hesitation, just precision. No one spoke. Not Thatcher, not Sloane, not the guests watching from a distance. Because something about that moment demanded attention. Vance rested his hand lightly on top of the briefcase, not opening it yet, just holding it there. Like the weight of what was inside didn't need to be shown immediately. Only understood. He looked at Thatcher again. Not with anger. Not with emotion. Just clarity. You're going to repeat that, Vance said calmly. One more time. Thatcher frowned. What? That statement, Vance continued. Say it again. A pause. Short. Tense. Then Thatcher spoke. Slower this time, but still trying to hold on to control. This house belongs to my spouse. Vance gave a small nod, as if confirming something. Then his hand moved. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Reaching for the latch. The room felt tighter. Every person watching leaned slightly closer, without realizing they were doing it. Because whatever was about to happen wasn't small. And that's when everything changed. Vance flipped the latch. A soft click. Small sound. But in that room, it carried weight. He lifted the lid of the briefcase slowly, not for effect, but because there was no need to rush. Inside were documents. Neatly arranged. Organized. Not cluttered. Not overwhelming. Just precise. He reached in and removed a single folder. Closed the briefcase again. And placed the folder on the table. He opened it carefully, turning it so Thatcher and Sloane could see. This, Vance said, his voice steady, is the original trust. The word hung there. Trust. Not suggestion. Not opinion. Something official. Something binding. Thatcher frowned slightly, stepping closer despite himself. Sloane remained where she was, but her attention sharpened. You're going to want to listen carefully, Vance continued, because everything you think you control starts here. Vance tapped the document lightly. This property was placed into a living trust 22 years ago, he said, established by Harlan and Beatrice Harlan. He didn't look at me when he said my name. He didn't need to. The room already understood who I was. Primary beneficiary, he continued, Beatrice Harlan. A pause. Then, not transferable without her direct, verified authorization. The words settled slowly. Thatcher's expression tightened. That doesn't matter, he said quickly. Things have changed since then. Vance didn't react. He simply turned the page. Ah, Vance said quietly, you're referring to this. He pulled out another document. Set it down next to the first. This, he said, is the transfer you've been relying on. Sloane stepped forward now, her composure still intact, but thinner than before. Yes, she said, that's been processed legally. Vance looked at her. For the first time, fully. And there was no uncertainty in his expression. No, he said, it hasn't. He slid the document slightly forward. Signature doesn't match, he said, not even close. Sloane's posture stiffened. That's not true, she replied. It was verified. By who? Vance asked. She didn't answer immediately. Because there wasn't a strong answer. Vance continued. We had it examined this morning, he said. Independent review, ink age doesn't align with the date listed. Pressure patterns are inconsistent, and the signature itself. He paused briefly. Is a forgery. The word landed harder than anything before it. Forgery. Clear. Direct. Unavoidable. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Guests who had been watching now shifted, exchanging looks. Not speaking, but understanding. This wasn't a disagreement. This was exposure. Thatcher shook his head quickly. That's ridiculous, he said. You can't just walk in here and... I can, Vance interrupted calmly, and I just did. Vance pulled out another sheet. This, he said, is where it gets worse. He placed it down. Emergency guardianship filing, he continued, claiming Beatrice Harlan was no longer capable of managing her affairs. I felt the words before I reacted to them. Guardianship. They hadn't just tried to take the house. They had tried to erase me from it. Sloane stepped forward again. That was filed based on concern, she said. We were protecting her. Vance didn't raise his voice. Didn't argue. He just pointed to a section of the document. No medical evaluation attached, he said. No independent assessment, just a claim signed and submitted. Another pause. Then, which makes it false. Thatcher's confidence was slipping now. Not all at once, but enough. You don't understand the situation, he said, his voice less steady than before. We were trying to manage things properly. No, Vance said. You were trying to take control. Direct. Final. No room to argue around it. The room felt different now. Not tense in the same way as before. Clear. Like everything had been laid out in a way that couldn't be ignored. Sloane's composure was still there, but strained. Her responses slower. Her posture tighter. Thatcher, on the other hand, was beginning to unravel in a way he couldn't hide. His eyes moved between the documents, the table, the floor, like he was searching for something that would undo what had just been said. Vance closed the folder slowly. Not with force, not with emphasis, just completion. Legally, he said, nothing you've claimed holds. A pause. Then, you don't own this house. Silence. Full. Heavy. No one moved. Thatcher looked up sharply. You can't just. Yes, Vance said, I can. Then he stepped forward. Just enough. Closing the distance between them. His presence didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was already enough. You've made claims, Vance continued. You've taken action based on those claims, and now you're going to deal with the consequences. Thatcher's jaw tightened. Frustration rising. Anger pushing through what was left of his control. This isn't over, he said. Vance looked at him. Completely steady. Then said, why don't you try hitting me? The room froze. Not because of the words alone, but because of how they were said. No challenge. No threat. Just certainty. Thatcher didn't move. Didn't step forward. Didn't respond. Because for the first time, he understood something. The dynamic had changed. Completely. The control he thought he had was gone. And standing in front of him now was someone who wouldn't be pushed, wouldn't be dismissed, wouldn't be ignored. Sloane didn't speak. Not immediately. Because there was nothing left to correct. Nothing left to adjust. Every angle she had relied on had been removed. All that remained was reality. Vance stepped back slightly, returning to the table. The documents remained there. Visible. Undeniable. This is done, he said. Not loudly. Not aggressively. Just clearly. And in that moment, everything they built their control on collapsed. The room hadn't fully recovered from what had just been revealed. No one rushed to speak. No one tried to argue. Because there was nothing left to defend. Vance stood beside the table, one hand resting lightly on the closed folder, his presence steady, unchanged. Then he spoke. You have 1 hour, he said. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just final. To gather your things and leave this property. The words settled without resistance. No negotiation offered. No extension implied. Just a clear line drawn. Sloane was the first to react. Not outwardly at first. But it showed. In the way her eyes moved quickly across the room. In the way her posture, once so controlled, began to tighten. 1 hour, she said, her voice still measured, but thinner now. That's not reasonable. Vance didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her. Then, it's more than you gave her. That was enough. Sloane's composure didn't disappear, but it cracked. Thatcher stood still for a moment longer. Like his mind hadn't caught up to what was happening. This doesn't make sense, he said, his voice lower now, uncertain. We've been here, we've invested. In something that was never yours, Vance replied. That ended it. Whatever structure Thatcher had been holding onto gave way. His shoulders dropped slightly. His eyes shifted, no longer fixed with confidence, but searching. This can't just end like this, he said. But it already had. For the first time since all of this began, They weren't directing anything. No decisions. No adjustments. No control over what came next. The authority they had carried through that house, through every room, every change, every dismissal, was gone. And they felt it. The guests didn't stay. Not after that. One by one, quietly, they began to leave. No questions. No goodbyes. Just a silent understanding that whatever they had walked into was not something they belonged in. The house emptied quickly. Voices faded. Movement slowed. Until only a few remained. And even they kept their distance. Sloane moved first. Not out of acceptance. Out of necessity. She turned without another word and walked toward the staircase. Her steps were faster now. Less controlled. Driven. Thatcher hesitated. Still standing where he was, as if staying still might change something. But it didn't. Go, Vance said. One word. That was all it took. Thatcher followed. The house that had been so carefully managed shifted, not into disorder immediately, but into something less stable. Drawers opened. Closets emptied. Footsteps moved quickly from room to room. The sound of items being gathered, no longer arranged, filled the space. Suitcases appeared, pulled from corners, dragged across floors. Zippers closing. Voices raised, not in control, but in urgency. This won't fit. Leave it. Where is? Nothing was organized now. Nothing was planned. Everything was reaction. Not everything made it into those suitcases. It couldn't. Time didn't allow for it. And for the first time, they had to decide what mattered most. What they could carry. What they would abandon. Items they once displayed proudly. Left behind. Objects they had replaced mine with. Now discarded themselves. Because in that moment, ownership didn't mean anything. Only exit did. He came down the stairs last. A bag in one hand. The rest of him heavier. Slower. Different. The confidence was gone. The certainty replaced with something quieter. He didn't look at Vance. Didn't look at Sloane. He looked at me. For a moment. Just a moment. And in that look, there was something there. Not enough to fix anything, but enough to recognize what had been lost. He opened his mouth slightly, like he was going to say something. But no words came. Because there weren't any left that would matter. They didn't argue on the way out. Didn't resist. Didn't delay. They moved toward the door with what they could carry. Suitcases in hand. Steps heavier than when they first arrived. Sloane walked ahead. Focused forward. Still holding onto what little composure remained. Thatcher followed behind her. Slower. Quieter. The door opened. And then closed. The house stood still. Not empty, but quiet. A different kind of quiet than before. Not heavy. Not hollow. Clear. The kind of quiet that comes after something has been set right. No footsteps. No voices. No movement. Just space. Suitcases had rolled across those floors minutes ago. Now there was nothing. Rooms that had been filled with noise. Returned to stillness. The air itself felt different. Lighter. Steady. The house hadn't changed. But what filled it had. I stood there for a moment, taking it in. Not celebrating. Not reacting. Just standing in what remained. Because the fight wasn't loud in the end. It didn't need to be. Everything that needed to happen had already happened. After they left, the house didn't rush back into anything. It settled. Slowly. Like it needed a moment to recognize itself again. I walked through each room at my own pace. Not inspecting. Not searching. Just being there. The walls hadn't changed. The structure hadn't shifted. But the feeling inside it was different. Lighter. Steady. No tension waiting in the corners. No voices carrying through rooms that didn't belong to them. Just space. And quiet. Some things were out of place. Some things were gone. But not everything had been taken. The important parts were still there. I stepped onto the porch later that afternoon. The spot where the rocking chair used to sit felt empty at first. But not lost. Because what it stood for didn't leave with it. Memories don't disappear just because objects do. They stay. In ways no one can carry off or replace. Vance didn't leave right away. He stayed for a few days. Not because I asked him to. Because he understood that sometimes presence matters more than anything else. He didn't interfere. Didn't rearrange things. Didn't ask questions that didn't need answers. He just made sure everything was settled. Properly. Completely. We spoke in short conversations. Simple ones. About the house. About Harlan. About time. Not about what had happened. Because we both already understood it. There's a difference between people who say they're family and people who show it when it counts. Vance didn't need to explain himself. He showed up. He saw what needed to be done. And he handled it. No hesitation. No delay. That kind of strength doesn't ask for recognition. It just acts. I thought about Thatcher. Not constantly. Not with anger. But with clarity. I remembered the boy he used to be. The way he used to run through these halls. The way he used to sit beside his father, asking questions about things he didn't yet understand. That boy wouldn't have stood in front of me and said what he said. Wouldn't have raised his hand. Wouldn't have turned something meaningful into something transactional. Somewhere along the way, he changed. And not in small ways. People often think forgiveness is immediate. That once something is over, everything should return to normal. But that's not how it works. Not when the line has been crossed that far. I didn't chase after him. Didn't call. Didn't ask for explanations. Because some actions speak clearly enough on their own. And when they do, you listen. This was never just about a house. Not truly. It was about respect. About understanding what something means beyond its value. About recognizing who built it. Who sacrificed for it. Who gave their time, their effort, their life to create something that lasts. Because when respect is gone, nothing else holds. Not ownership. Not claims. Not titles. None of it. You can leave someone an inheritance. You can give them land. You can pass down everything you own. But if they don't understand respect, they won't know how to keep any of it. And eventually, they'll lose it. Not because someone takes it from them, but because they never understood what it required in the first place. Respect always comes before inheritance, not after. If you ignore stories like this, don't complain when it happens. Subscribe, or tell me why you think you're different. By the end of the week, Vance was gone. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just the way he arrived. Quiet. Certain. Everything that needed to be handled had been handled. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not pushed aside. Not waiting. Standing. In my home. The house felt whole again. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. No pretending. No shifting control. Just truth. And sometimes, that's all you need to rebuild something properly. If you believe respect matters, subscribe. And tell me, would you have forgiven him